Just, there we go. There's the chime that tells us we are recording. So welcome to this developer community session, very much focused around bulk URL updates, as that is the topic of the moment. As I say, we are recording this. In terms of introductions, we've got a number of people here who are kind of regularly joining in the developer community calls to chat about using stuff like APIs and all sorts of other kind of technology around the edges of Talis Aspire, and kind of trying to solve problems that individual universities have in a very kind of bespoke kind of way. And you're all more than welcome to join us for those calls. You're more than welcome to be part of that. I have mentioned the APIs word, and I want to reassure you that we're not going to force you to have to do anything with the APIs. Hopefully we're going to make you happy at the end of this by the fact that you haven't had to deal with the APIs quite so much. And the other thing that's important to say is that there's no such thing as a silly question. So please do ask questions as we go through. Again, use the chat channel, and Laura and Rich hopefully will keep on top of that, and let me know if there are any questions that I need to do. So as an outline, what is the developer community? Bulk URL updates. We're going to look at the overview of the process. Joe is very kindly, Joe Munzer from York St John, has very kindly offered to demo the process for us, and then we'll kind of we'll go through questions and talk about next steps after that. As I was saying, the developer community is a bunch of people who like asking questions, and there's some other people there that like answering those questions. And there's a few people who can build stuff, and we're all kind of more than happy to share what we're building. And I think that's very much the Talis ethos generally in the Talis Aspire community. And it's exactly the same in the developer community. And we're more than happy. In fact, we would encourage people who are not considering themselves developers to actually come and join those discussions, because more often than not we end up talking about, so what does that mean for the library, or so what does that mean for the workflows? If you're accessing this information, what are you going to do with it? And actually understanding use cases around the tools that are being built helps us to build better tools, and that's been very evident in the process that we've gone through over the last few weeks. We have been looking at bulk URL updates. We've been looking at them because there are changes afoot with Dawson Era updating or having to change URLs for Dawson Era. And there are many other situations where being able to update URLs in bulk is useful. The Talis Aspire developer community has very much come together to go, okay, so how can we solve this? We know there's some APIs. We know that there's something we could do. What does it need to look like? And we've had input from people who are not developers who have helped us to get to a point where we've got a tool basically which works, which is what you all want to know. So in terms of the process, the basic process is, the first stage is to identify the items that need to be updated. Then you'll need to get some credentials from Talis in order to be able to actually use the APIs. And you will you will not have to do anything other than copy and paste those credentials into the right file when we get to that point in the setup, in the installation. That's all you have to do with them. You'll have to install a tool to make the updates. Now, the tool that we're using, the way that it's built, does require administrator access to your computer. If you don't have that, you can usually get somebody from IT to get that actioned for you. They might even sit and remote control your desktop. We heard somebody who basically said, this is the README file of how to set this up, and they remote controlled their desktop, and the IT team just sat there and got it all working for them. And then it's basically a case of running the updates, and we'll talk about what the files look like. Going back to step one, I'm going to share a file here. I've got an Excel file here, which hopefully you can see. And I've kind of simplified this somewhat. The all list items report has the information that you need for these two columns. The item URL, I did this very quickly this morning. The item URL will be the link from the all list items report, and the old URL is in fact the web address field from the all list items report.
Tim, people aren't able to see the file that you're sharing.
Are they not?
Can. Oh, is it? It might be a
Oh yes, unpin me.
It pinned you rather than the screen sharing. That makes sense.
Yes, unpin me if you can't see an Excel file at the moment.
Yeah, I found there's some settings in the bottom right in Hangouts where you can change the screen layout to spotlight, which highlights the most important thing. So I've done that, and that's how I'm viewing. If that helps people.
Good idea.
So in the hamburger bar at the bottom right, and then change layout, and then spotlight.
Excellent. Brilliant. Okay, as long as that doesn't, well, that shouldn't, because I'm presenting, so that should be fine. Okay, so the item URL and web address, these come from the all list items report. What we've done here is I've just filtered out a few for the Dawson era domain for this particular use case. Obviously, the workflow is exactly the same for any other web address that you're looking for. In terms of making sure that you've found the right web addresses, we're actually in the process, and I was hoping it would be live so I could show it you today, but we've got a few last stages to go through to make it live. We're in the process of adding some extra columns to the all list items report. And we are adding the web address, which is on the part record, as well as the web address, which is on the main record. So where you've got a chapter is part of a book. If there's a web address on either of those parts, we'll then be able to show that within two different columns, so you'll know where it is. We're also going to be adding some detail around the online resource, which is what you know as the View Online button. Within the data, we know it as the online resource. And we're going to be adding two columns, one which shows you what is selected in terms of, is it the open URL, the DOI, or the web address, which is selected as the source for the View Online button. And if the source is the web address, we'll actually show you which web address is selected, because you can have resources in Talis Aspire which have multiple web addresses on them, and sometimes you kind of want to know which is the main one and which is selected. So yes.
Could you zoom in a little bit on the spreadsheet you've got on your screen? I think a few people can't quite see it because it's quite small text. So just make the text bigger.
Yes, I should be able to. There we go. Maybe that's a bit big. There we go.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And yeah, so look out for that. Hopefully in the next couple of days, we should be able to add that to the all list items report. As I say, we're just working through the final changes that we need to make for that. In terms of this spreadsheet that I've got here, I am making an assumption that you've already got the item URLs and web addresses from the all list items report. These two columns I have added, and in the new URL column, in this particular instance, I happen to know that the new URL that I need just needs to have the ISBN from the old URL pasted into it effectively. So what I'm doing here is I've looked at my first URL, I've looked at the ISBN value that I can see there, I've typed it into this column. I haven't done anything special to extract it, I've literally just typed it into this column. And I'm going to use the flash fill option to use Excel's magic to actually work out how to get that value from each of these values and fill it down here. So you can see that it's automatically worked out which value I want. One thing to be aware of here, if you change the values in this column after you've done a flash fill, it's not a live link to that data. So if you do change the data, you will have to remember to do the flash fill again, but it would be as simple as just deleting the rows that you've done, selecting that first item and doing the flash fill again, and you can see that that's now up to date. So that's just a possible gotcha. In this last column, I've simply got a little formula. I don't know if I can, I don't think you'll see that. I'm using my zoom tool, but no. I've got a little formula which basically concatenates this column with a string which is hard coded in the formula. And that just gives us the new URL. And then what we'll actually need, and there's a number of ways of doing this. I've just gone for a simple function. It's pretty ugly because we've got all these zeros. Zoom in again. A bit further. But this is just using a function to select the whole of each of the three columns that we care about, which is the item URL, the web address URL that we're going to change, and the new URL that is going to become. Now, I've seen that we've had a question about the ISBNs, and yes, it is possible that the ISBNs may vary between one platform and the other. I happen to know, because we've spoken to Askews who have actually bought the assets from Dawson Era, I happen to know that they are keeping the ISBNs the same between pulling it out of the Dawson Era system and loading it into their system. So I do know that for Askews, they are going to be the same. But yes, for other platforms, they may have different ISBNs depending on how that work was acquired and how the metadata is organized. So ideally, what you will want is some sort of mapping file from your new supplier for the Dawson Era content. In the case of Askews, we know that they can't release that mapping until after the kind of the legal transition of the assets to them has completed. We believe that's going to be on the 31st of July. But as with these things, there may be a different time scale at when we get there. But that's what we understand to be the case at this time. Okay, what's another question? What's the difference between item URL and old URL? Yeah, I just put a value in here just so there was something. What this would be is actually the tenancy URL for the item itself, and it's it will have an identifier. I haven't got one actually. Yeah, I have got one. Let me use this one. So from your report, you would get something that looks a bit like that. My tenancy is called technical one. My item's ID is that, and this whole thing is the item URL. You'll find this in the item link column. No, don't do that. Undo that change because it messes up the display. Now, there may be other things that you have to do. So if your ISBNs aren't the same, and depending on what the supplier can give you, hopefully you'll be able to give them some output from the all list items report that allows them to match to the new URLs for the new supplier. You'll have to have a conversation with your supplier to see what it is that they can supply. If you do have any issues with getting that data out of the all list items report, I think the simplest thing is to raise a support ticket, and we do have a support article which is going to be talking about some methods of doing this, which we can share with you as well. But basically, just ask if you get stuck. Yeah, there are other ways in Excel of doing lookups of one value and translating them into another value using things like the VLOOKUP function. If anybody's familiar with that, it might be something that's worth doing. But I'm not going to get into that just here because that becomes a lot more complicated. Okay. So, yeah, there's another question there around the ISBNs and the MARC records. So yes, Askews and Holtz are also they're acquiring the MARC records along with the PDF files or the electronic assets, and yes, that will probably result in an LCN change if you are loading new records into your library catalog. And the question is, can we do an update of LCN using the tool? I think we don't have that in the tool just yet, but there's no reason that we can't add something to do that within the tool, we being the developer community, because that's certainly possible with the APIs to be able to do that kind of thing. So just to summarize for the data preparation, step 1, identify which URLs need to change. Step 2, find out what the new URLs will be. Obviously, that's something that mainly is going to come from the new supplier. Map the old URLs to the new URL. And I've mentioned those 2 things there about the ISBNs for Dawsonia and ASCIIs, which I spelt wrong, and for other providers, you'll need to ask them. And I've talked about Excel. I've talked about the flash fill option for actually finding the ISBNs in the string. And we had a quick look at a very simple string manipulation. Once you've got a set of data, the tool that we've built actually allows you to do a number of different things. It allows you to add a new URL to an existing item. It allows you to replace a URL for an existing item, and it allows you to delete a URL from that item, depending on what data you put in which columns. I'm not going to go into that here because I think that would be easier to demonstrate with Joe's example, what's happening there. In order to use the bulk tool, you will need your credentials. So just raise a support ticket, email support@talis.com, asking for credentials for this tool, and we'll work through those over the coming days and push those out. So the bulk tool itself is available from this URL. And I'll just pop that in the chat window so that you have that as well. So far, it does a number of different things. The tool was actually started by Joe to solve some very specific problems at York St John, where they wanted to add some items to every list which had messages about resources that had been made available as a result of the COVID-19 changes that publishers were making earlier in the year. And he's actually used those to add items to lists, to remove items from lists, and so on. I just want to draw your attention to one of the things that the tool does that we'd like you to not use just at the moment, and that's the option to publish lists. There is an explanation of why in the README file, and I'm not going to go into details, but I'm just going to say, please don't use the publish option in that tool at this stage. We will be replacing the API call that it's making under the hood so that it doesn't cause a potential problem. But at the moment, please don't use that. Also, there's a function in there to recode lists, basically to give them a new module code, which again is something that Joe's used at York St John. The one that we're going to concentrate on today is the one that's in the URL folder. So as you can imagine, we're kind of seeing a whole number of different use cases cropping up, and those are becoming kind of more varied and more functional as other people feed back to the developer community and saying, you know, that's great, but it'd be really great if it could also. So yeah, we're always interested to hear what you have to suggest. So at this point, I think I've done enough talking. We'll hand over to Joe, and he's going to demo the tool and talk through the installation process as well.
Okay, hello. Can everyone hear me? Cool. I'm seeing some nods, so I'll take that as a yes. Yeah. Okay. So touch wood, this all works. It's a live demo, and I know what they say. Whenever you do something that's not pre-recorded, it's all going to go terribly wrong. So let's try and be the exception to that rule today. Okay, so basically I'm going to take you guys through from not having had it installed on your computer at all, not having the prerequisite tools installed, all the way through to hopefully making some changes. So without further ado, let's present. So I'm going to present my entire screen. It's quite a big screen, so hopefully it won't look too small for you guys. If I make it a little bit bigger, you can probably see. Hopefully that looks okay. Please do shout though if I need to make that a little bit bigger. So I suppose to start with, let me just show what we've got on a test list. So here we go. So I've got my 4 Dawson Era ebooks, 4 different volumes. And they all currently have a view online button there. If I click at just one of these and we go to edit, that might be quite small. There we go. Hopefully you can all see it's got a web address and it's a Dawson Era address there, and this one happens to be 3. I've done my work behind the scenes here, and I've downloaded my all list items report. And I've created the file that I need. So I'm just going to show you guys that really quickly here. If I make that a little bit bigger. So here you can see the item ID that you pull out from the all list items report. Here you can see my old URL, Dawson Era 1. And now I want to change it to vlebooks.com/1, for example. And, you know, what should I say? Other suppliers are, you know, you can use other suppliers. And these are comma separated here, so you can see there. That's the old URL. This is the new URL. Okay, that we want to change these items to. So I've called that test file. So if I just put that over there for now. Now, if we click on the link that Tim shared, this will take us to the GitHub page, and if you just scroll down a little bit, it'll show you the README file. So if we just kind of go through this together, and hopefully it's all going to work out great for us. So I've uninstalled any of the applications and tools that I had on here before this session. So hopefully it's at least similar to what you guys, similar experience to what you guys will have. So okay. So first things first, please download and run XAMPP. So this is a tool that allows it basically creates a local web server on your computer, and it's a prerequisite for reading PHP files, which is a language that this program was written in. So let's click on that link. Keep trying to make these pages a bit bigger so you can see. So I'm going to choose what version I want, and I should say actually that this application has been we've designed it for Windows. So I'm just downloading that now. That's just downloading in the bottom corner. I'll just give that a second. In fact, I might even have it already downloaded. I do. Okay. So I'm just going to skip waiting for that download, and I'm going to run the install file here. It's this one here, XAMPP x64 is the version I'm running. Just going to minimize that. Now this is probably going to look a little bit small, so I'll just read out what it's saying. Important because of activated user account control, some functions may be restricted using XAMPP. If you get that message, it's not a problem. User account control is something that just it's where Windows checks that malicious files aren't getting installed onto your computer without your permission. So I'm going to click OK there. And then it's just like any other installer or setup. I'm going to click Next. Now with select components, we can actually untick everything that is untickable. So a couple of things are grayed out, like for example, program languages, so PHP and Apache, but everything else can be unticked here. And I do talk about that as well in the, where are we? I do talk about that in here as well. So untick everything besides Apache and PHP. So I've done that and I'm clicking next. It's going to set the default install location to C:/XAMPP. Now we can leave that, and actually, if you can also install it in the root of C at CXAMPP, that's ideal, because a lot of these instructions moving forward work on the assumption that you've installed to that folder location. So here we go. Yeah. So control panel for Windows supports different languages, and I've selected English there. Now you can untick this one. This is just asking if you want to install another application called Bitnami that allows you to install open source apps and extra plugins. So we don't want that. And then just click next, and that's just going to run through and install now. I'll just put that to one side. Now you may get a pop-up which is your Windows firewall asking about whether it has permission to access external files or external networks. This works entirely, this tool works entirely on your local computer. So you can unplug your internet cable, you can disconnect from your Wi-Fi, it's going to work fine. So I've put here that if you tick private networks such as my home or work network, for your firewall settings, if it does prompt for that, you can select it, but you can also disregard that message as well if you want. It's not sending any files, at least as the web server runs. It's not having to communicate externally. Although of course the script is, because it's updating your Talis reading lists. But yeah, if you get a Windows firewall pop-up, I won't get one, but if you guys do, you can select private networks. And here we go. I think we're nearly ready. Now, when this finishes, it's just going to pop up and say, just give that a second. Here we go. So it's going to ask if we want to start the control panel now. Let's leave that ticked and just hit finish. Okay. I wish this was a little bit bigger for you all, but basically there's a couple of there's a lot of options and buttons here. All we need to do is select this top service here, Apache, and click start. You'll see it turn yellow and then turn green. If it turns green next to Apache, that means the service is running and you don't need to do anything more with that. You can just minimize that control panel. And when you're finished using the tool, you can just stop it again afterwards. But it's as simple as that, really. Start or stop for Apache. So I'm going to minimize that now. Okay, so we've already performed this action, and we've already got it running and selected as highlighted as green. Okay, so now we can download the script. So if you click this link, it'll download our tools, and there we go. That's already done that. So I'm going to click Show in Folder, right click, Extract All, and when it asks me where I want to extract these files, we're going to want to extract them to the following location, provided you've installed XAMPP to this location. So provided you've installed XAMPP to the root of C, we can set this, so we can just paste this straight in. So I'll come back here. Files will be extracted to XAMPP htdocs and show extracted files when complete. That's great. So I'm going to click next. And here we are. I've got my extracted folder here, bulk tools master. So I can double click on that now. If I just minimize that for 1 second and we scroll down, there's a little bit here that Tim's written in about configuring this for your tenancy. Now this is really straightforward. So I'll skip over this, except to say that I've configured my file. I've renamed my template file to userconfig.php, and I'm going to drag that into the right folder. If we click here on this link, this will open up the tool running on the XAMPP server. So if I click here, and there we go, that's loaded up the tool, and this is the index page that you'll be presented with. If you just bear with me 1 second, I will copy my, where are you? If you bear with me for 1 second, I've got my, where are my files? Userconfig.php. So I'm just going to put that in the XAMPP folder. Into bulk tools master. So I'm going to paste that in, and now I've got my config file in there as per the instructions. So at this point, I should be ready to actually use this tool. We've also got an extra little warning here saying that the tool won't work unless you've added your user config file in there. So that's great. We can do that. Okay. So yeah, now at this point, we'll use the URL tool. So I'm going to click on this. I'll try and just get that in the middle of the screen there, so that's a bit more obvious to you guys. So here we go. Please upload a CSV file containing the following in order. So you've got your Talis item ID taken from your all list items report and the item GUID. You've got your old current URL and your new URL, comma separated between each one, and the line break per row. Okay, so configuration. So we're going to send this file. So we're going to choose our test file that we had before. And just as a reminder, I'm just going to edit with Notepad++ so we can see what it looks like. Okay, yeah, that looks great. We've got our old URLs and our new ones. So I'm just going to close that, get rid of that there. Open the file, so it says choose file, and we've got our test file there. Now you can select your logging level. I'd recommend setting it to warning. What that's going to tell you is it's going to show you all error messages and warnings. If I set it to info, it would show me information messages, warnings, and errors. And if I'm having problems, I might set it to debug, and that will show me all of the output. And that will include, did you get an API token? Did it successfully get a resource ID? And it'll break down every single request in a lot of detail, so you can unpick anything. And I think that's especially useful if you if things aren't behaving the way that you want and you want to see why not. Or if you, when you're doing your first couple of runs and you just want to see what's going on, that's going to output all that to the screen. But for me, I'm just going to set warnings, so that'll just tell me if there's anything I need to act upon. Okay, we've also got a box here that's tick this box to write to live tenancy. We had some really good suggestions about adding in dry run functionality in past in past chats. So that's what that is really. If you don't tick the box, it just spits out the output, and then but it doesn't actually write any of those changes. So you can check what's going to happen before you do it. I am going to make the changes though. So let's do this. Tick this box to write to live tenancy. Okay. And we'll just nip back to here as well quickly and just check. Yeah, that's still showing us Dawson error for this volume 1. Okay, so let's go here and hit send. Cross my fingers. Okay, so here we go. So starting, so we can go back to the tool here, but this is spitting out a little bit of useful information to us. So it's telling us what our tenancy shortcode is that it got from the config file, our client ID, the user GUID, which is that represents me, Joe Munzer. That's my unique code, who's making the changes. Writing to live tenancy true, logging level selected is warning, and file uploaded, and this is the file that we uploaded. So we can click here to download our output CSV, but what I want to do first of all is actually go over to my tenancy and see and see has it made the changes. So if I just refresh this, and there you go, you can see that's now changed from Dawson error to VLE Books 3. If I come back to my library systems list here as well, we can see whether these other ones also changed. So we've got volume 1, I think this was the one that we were looking at before. Yeah, so VLE Books 3. Apologies that 1 represents 3 and it's all a little bit the wrong way around. That's only because I was from the all list items report, the item IDs weren't in this order of 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think it was like 3, 1, 2, and 4, but they do map up. There, VLE books 2, that's changed to. We can check these other ones. So that's 4 VLE books. That's looking good. And we'll just check our last one as well. Edit. Okay. So I actually had a couple of other resources in here, and we've added in an additional web address, and it's assigned at the online resource, which means it's the it's that view online button basically at the end. So there you go. That's it, I suppose, in a nutshell, really. Yeah, that's how that works. So what we've also got is you can download a report file as well, which contains information on what's changed, what this run has done. And these are useful to hold on to should you ever need to revert any of the changes that you've made or any of the work that you've done. If I just click to open this now, here we go. So if I expand this, make it a little bit bigger, hopefully you can all see that okay. I've just realized I'm going to have to probably zoom out a little bit in a second when I stretch these out. But if I just, here we go. So I'll just talk you guys through this briefly and kind of explain how we can, how this is kind of useful to us. So for every run that you do, you will have a couple of lines at the top and one line at the bottom. So this says, obviously, here's the file that you uploaded, should you ever need to find your original source file, your date and timestamp. Now, I appreciate that's 12:46. My XAMPP server is actually running an hour ahead, so I just need to change my regional settings there, and that'll work. It might be possible for us to actually add that into the script if everyone's a UK customer. I wasn't sure if we had people from Australia as well, though, so I didn't want to make any assumptions there. It tells us whether we were writing to our live tenancy or not, so that's true. And here's the user, Joe Munzer here. That's what I represent. So we've got our 4 item IDs. We can see that, and I don't know if Tim spoke about this too much, but we can see the old URLs that we put in the file and the new URLs that we put in. So all this information here is what existed in our input file actually. And we can see that because of the logic here, they're all replaces. Now, if we loaded in a file that didn't have an old URL, but did have a new URL, then that would be seen as an add. So you can add URLs where to items that don't currently have any URL set in them, and it will assign it the online resource just by not putting anything in the old URL, you know, in between two commas. And that would then appear as a transaction type add. And if you had an old URL but not a new URL, it would be a transaction type delete. So you can always kind of track, and you can see the logic that's being used to decide the transaction type that's occurred there by looking at these files. We can see our resource IDs. Now, I know there's been some messages that have gone out in the past around some communications around the difference between an item ID and a resource ID, and obviously that's something you guys can kind of look into, but it's useful to see that for future troubleshooting and any future work that you might want to do. Okay, so here we've got the current web address array. So what this is telling us is this is what is currently set in the, and if I can pull it up here, this is what is currently set in the list of items here. If we added, so say for example, oh, in fact, we've got an example, haven't we, on the 4th one? So here for the 4th one, you can see we've got 3 different links here. So that, this is the web address array, all of the items that exist here, and the view online is seen as the online resource that is set. So if I come back here, we can see that this top item here had a current web address array of, I don't know, can I highlight that easily? No, yeah. So we've got 3 URLs here basically selected, and they are, is that a pipe? I don't know what character that is, but they're basically pipe separated, let's call it. Obviously, these items only had 1 item in each of the address arrays, so that's all they're showing. This also tells us what the current online resource is set to before making the changes, so that's great. And if I come forward here, we can see the match array. So where there was a match, it'll show us, and these numbers always start from 0. So the match with the web address array and the current online resource in the old URL, should I say, it'll say what that match was. So that was matching on array number 0 there, and this one happened to be on array 2. Also, I suppose for troubleshooting. And then you've got your patch status as well. So resource URL updated successfully. If we were running a dry run, these would say test run. We would have added in there. But that's telling you that this was obviously successful, and that's great. And then we can see when it stopped, and we can see a date and time there as well, if we want to see how long this run took us. And in this case, it was 3 seconds. So that's great. Okay, so I'm just going to close that. Oh, I should say as well, actually, if you run this multiple times, it just appends to the same file. So any future reports that you do, they just queue up on the bottom of the same file if you're looking for them. So let's close that for now. Don't save. And if I come back to here and click back to URL tool and back to index, you can also access all of your output logs here from the index page by clicking on output directory and then selecting, I think URL output will give you that particular file. But for the other functions that we have, we've got the other log files as well there. So I think that's probably about it for me. Do we have any questions?
Great, thanks, Joe. Yeah, we have had a few questions, which we'll just run through. We'll skip the question for Bristol about the statue. We've done that one. Yeah, so Amjad was asking about a 32-bit version of XAMPP for those that don't have a 64-bit machine. And we did a very quick Google. That we haven't tried this link, and we haven't tried it on a 32-bit machine, but there's a link that we found, and that will allow you to download something, hopefully. What it is worth saying is that XAMPP is, or XAMPP, or XAMPP, as we discovered in the promotional video for XAMPP earlier, that is basically just providing a web server that is able to run PHP. If you already have an environment that allows you to run PHP via a web server so that you can see the HTML pages, you are more than welcome to use a different environment. But XAMPP, we did a poll kind of early on in the developer community and found that most people had, I think, Windows 10 Home Edition or something like that, which meant that there were this was kind of the lowest common denominator that we could find. Running on from that, we also had a question about whether this could be Dockerized, and absolutely it could. And in fact, we did actually try that to begin with, but then we found that, again, going on Windows, because the Docker environment from Docker Hub has, because the Docker environment from Docker Hub has doesn't basically work on Windows Home, Windows 10 Home. So yeah, but we would like to find a way to Dockerize it, because that would make us happy, basically. How many URLs can? Oh no, let me do that question first. Will this work on a Mac? Yes, there is a version of XAMPP which works on a Mac. It's pretty much the same instructions. You'll have a slightly different interface for the Mac. I do actually have it running on my machine. I've tested it out. So yes, it is possible to do that. You may have some issues with file permissions just because of the way that Mac has deals with that, but that's easily solvable. How many URLs can you change in one go? We'd probably say limit it to a few hundred at a time, because we're running this in XAMPP, and because it's a web page which is being submitted and then you're waiting for a response. There is a timeout for the execution of that script, so we'd suggest doing it in small batches. It also makes it easier to track for you. I think Joe's done about 500 at a time. Yeah,
so yeah, I think best practice probably would be, well, not that I really know what best practice is, but yeah, I would run one item and check that you're happy with the output of that and that it's behaving the way that you expect. I would then maybe move up to 10, which you can then check, or 5 and 10, and then from there just run in a batch of 50 and then move up to 100 and then maybe move up to 200. Connected with Kevin's question about changing the max execution timeout. So we've actually now written into the scripts and we've set the max execution timeout to 600 seconds. So if there's any mathematicians out there who can work out how long that is in minutes, I think it's about 5-6 minutes, something like that. Yeah, it's it'll run for that long before crashing out. And you'll get an error message saying, max execution timeout. So if you hit that, then you can either extend the max execution timeout at the top line of the script, or you just reduce the number of items that you put in through. But yeah, I think we found, yeah. So I was doing about 500 or 600 in about 6 minutes. I think that was what I found was very consistent. Yeah. And I did maybe 2,000 or 3,000 a while back.
Excellent. Yep. So there's also mention of archived lists. Now, archived lists don't actually have a draft, and the API that we're using is reading the draft of the list to find the item, and we're doing that because the all list items report can obviously show you web addresses on published lists, but also draft lists which might be about to be published, and you'd want to change those as well at the same time. Yeah, I think it will not work for archived lists. I have to say I haven't actually tried it, but I think it's going to basically give you an error message that it can't find the item. I'm aware we're just ticked over 12 o'clock there. This is where on the developer community calls I usually say it's lunchtime. There is one other question that I will address, which is around capacity. If everybody is planning to run this on the 31st of July, is it going to have capacity issues? We don't think so. I'm quietly confident about that. I did about 5,000 updates on Monday, not actually using this tool, but using exactly the same API. And yeah, there was barely a dent in the system, so I think it'll be fine. Obviously, you're running this in batches, so you would have to all coordinate and press go at exactly the same time, I think, to cause a denial of service attack. But Yeah, no, I think we'll be fine. Natalia can confirm that it doesn't work on archived lists as we thought. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Right. The developer community calls are every Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Do join us if you have any questions or if you want to know more. If there's anything that we still haven't answered, if you join the developer community email group, email us at support@talis.com and we'll get you added to that group, and you can always ask questions there, and people are always willing to help out there. So I'll kind of officially draw that to a close at that point and end the recording. And thank you all for your attention. And stop recording.